welcome back to the Viking Central podcast. I got a special guest here today, Thomas Gorski. You can follow him on Twitter at Thomas Gorski33. He's pretty active over there. Nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, it's great to meet you. I'm excited to be here, and you've got a pretty big Vikings following. I listen to all your tweets. We go a little way back, so I'm definitely really excited just to be able to talk some Vikings football with you and just keep going with it.
Yeah, it's always fun. And like you said, we've gone back and forth on Twitter probably for I'd say a good year or two at least. And this is the first time meeting, so finally getting to meet, and it's awesome. And it's an exciting day for Minnesota Vikings football. Kevin O'Connell will be introduced at 4:00 this afternoon. Like we were talking before, wish it was a little bit earlier so we could talk about it a little bit more. But nonetheless, very exciting. Are you pretty excited about the hire, or what's your kind of thoughts on Kevin O'Connell?
Originally I was a little skeptical, just because I was kind of like all in on Jim Harbaugh originally. Yep. But then once that all kind of like cooled down, and I finally got to like sit down and really take in the O'Connell hire and do some research of my own, I think he ended up being the right hire. He seemed the young up and coming coach that you need. He's a good young coach, coach to kind of team up with Kwesi. Kind of reminds me a lot of like the Brandon Staley to the Chargers.
Right.
Where you kind of have the core in place. You just need a young offensive mind to open it up and elevate everyone around him. So far, I like the hire, and some of his hirings on staff I think are pretty good.
Sure.
So you can't really go wrong with it. So I figure, you know what, I got to give him a chance. And so far, I'm impressed.
Good. Yeah, and I feel the same way, obviously. Well, before even the Jim Harbaugh talk, O'Connell was my number one choice, and then obviously Jim got brought into it, and that changed things because it's Jim Harbaugh. You got excited about that and the aspect of that happening, and then obviously it didn't happen, and everyone was kind of like, bummed about it. And then they announced Kevin O'Connell like an hour after it was announced that Harbaugh was returning to Michigan. And I felt pretty good about it. And like you said, you kind of do some more research and kind of get to know more about the coach. And like you said, he seems like a perfect candidate for the job. And I think it makes sense from going from Mike Zimmer, that hard-nosed defensive old school football guy. And then we hired Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, and I think Kevin O'Connell just matches what they're looking for. And, he's got that offensive approach. And it makes sense because I think our offense is ready to compete right now, and that's the way they've been for a few years. And, we've been a top 7 or 8 unit, even with Mike Zimmer kind of controlling, the offensive approach and stuff like that. So I think, implementing this offensive staff with Kevin O'Connell, I think it's going to get the best out of Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook and, all the weapons that we have. So I agree. I think it's a really excited hire. But, time will tell. Time will tell. On whether it's going to be, a really successful hire. It helps to work under Sean McVay and everything like that. Then Zach Taylor was on Sean McVay's staff. Matt LaFleur was on Sean McVay's staff. So do you think, the way that Sean McVay coaches and his coaching tree, do you think Kevin O'Connell's coaching style will translate just like LaFleur's and Taylor's?
I think it should, but O'Connell seems a little more down to earth than some of those guys. Because he played the quarterback position in the NFL. I believe he backed up Tom Brady in New England. So McVay, I know, was like a big star in high school, and I don't know much about LaFleur, about his football background besides coaching. I don't know much about Staley besides coaching, but O'Connell's played the game, and to me, he was brought in simply to just develop a quarterback.
Yeah.
Zimmer and Spielman clearly just couldn't figure out the quarterback position, so bringing in a 36, 37-year-old O'Connell kind of seems like we want to solidify this position. And overall, I really enjoy his coaching style, and I think he's really going to be able to open up this offense. But more so, I'm more excited about the 11 personnel. I'm a little tired, late in the year when you're down in the game and you got Conklin and obviously not Irv, but at the time when you have two tight end sets, I'm not a big fan of. I like having a third receiver out there. It'd be nice to maybe see KJ Osborne or like maybe someone else out there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, overall, the offense is going to open up, and I don't even know if the Vikings have even ran 11 personnel since maybe Favre.
No.
With, like,
Yeah. I agree. It's going to be a
it's,
whole new situation on the offensive side of the football. I don't think we're going to be checking down to C.J. Ham on 3rd and 8 anymore.
I'm not even sure if he'll even be around.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah, in Los Angeles, they didn't even use a fullback a majority of the time. So if that's going to be the case in Minnesota, yeah, CJ is a great player, but what other role is he going to be used in other than that? Fullback ahead of Dalvin Cook. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
I think he also, like, if they, like, released him or something, I think he'd, like, free up, like, $1.5 million or something for a team that's over the cap.
Right.
That seems like a very likely move if you're not going to utilize your
Yeah.
fullback. So,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of look at the cap situation because we're over the cap. We got a lot of players that are getting paid a lot of money right now, and you had a good transition into quarterback talk. And, Kirk Cousins is going to be the talk for the next month or so here. Is he going to stay at that $45 million cap hit? Is he going to get restructured? Is he going to get traded? What route do you think Kevin O'Connell and Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah are going to take with Kirk Cousins, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's really tough right now
It is tough.
The off season. There's just so many rumors and so much smoke screen going on. Because I don't think there's any chance Cousins stays at that $45 million cap hit. You just can't work like that.
No.
But it's also been reported that he's not going to be taking a team-friendly deal, and that he just wants to be known as the guy kind of who just is a great business mind in the NFL, kind of like Bradford was. I mean, a restructure seems the most likely area. But to me, it just kind of seems like you're kind of just doing it all over again. Like when they gave him the 2 years, $6 million extension. Yeah, he'll free up the cap space now. But then when he's like 37 years old, then he'll probably have like a $50 million cap hit. And it just seems like at his age, in the direction of where the team's going, I just don't see how that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Cousins is fine. He's statistically done very well in Minnesota, but they've only made the playoffs once in his 4 years here. Right. And they've had to let a lot of tough guys go due to that cap hit, which it's not Cousins' fault. Right. Spielman's the one who gave Cousins the deal, which ultimately, in my opinion, I think got Spielman fired because they were kind of like they were just live or die together kind of thing. Yep. They all seem connected. So that's why I do think they might try to go in another direction at quarterback with O'Connell and Kwesi, because if I believe O'Connell signed a 5-year deal, Kwesi signed for 4 years. Are they really going to put nearly half of their time of potentially their only head coaching and GM opportunity in the hands of Kirk Cousins?
Right.
I don't know how many GMs are necessarily going to do that. So they could possibly look to restructure and move him to somewhere like Cleveland. Just seems like the most logical landing spot. Right. It makes a lot of sense for me because one, Kwesi's got the connection to Andrew Berry. Stefanski knows Cousins. He was his quarterback coach, and he was his offensive coordinator. And they're really kind of in the spot where the Rams kind of were, where they really are kind of just a quarterback away.
Yeah.
Because Baker, he had the injury, but he still hasn't shown that it factor. He's not really necessarily a franchise guy you can lean on. But, he'd be a nice piece. Like, if you could get Baker Mayfield, pick 44, and maybe like a fourth that could be like a conditional third next year, and free up that $16 million. That kind of seems like the area that I think is good value for Cousins, and you can kind of bring Mayfield in for a year, see what he's got, if not let him walk. Right. But again, that's like what I would do. I don't know if O'Connell and Kwesi would do that because I think they're kind of comfortable with Cousins, and O'Connell's got that history. So maybe a restructure is the likely route. But if Derek Carr wants $35 to $40 million on his next deal, Cousins is going to want 40 to 45 then. That's kind of how the NFL works. Yeah. So I think that's a possible route we could go, and I'm not necessarily sure if I'm a big fan of that, but that just seems like with the Vikings of what they're likely going to do.
Yeah, no, I totally know where you're coming from there. And obviously, Kevin O'Connell has those connections like you were saying with Kirk Cousins. And, all the talk has been the last week or two that, Kevin O'Connell really likes Kirk Cousins. He really loves the way he is as a player, and they have a good working relationship. Obviously that's what he's going to say. He's not going to say anything different. That's what he's going to say because that's the right thing to say. And when I look back at Kirk Cousins right now, I just look at trade value. Is his trade value ever going to be any higher than it is right now? I don't think so. If we look to restructure and, we're right back in the same situation 2 or 3 years down the road, his trade value is not going to be anywhere near because his cap number is probably going to be higher and he's going to be 2 or 3 years older. He's going to be on the last leg of his career. So I think it makes sense right now that we need to, look at a trade. And like you said, Cleveland is an interesting spot. And Mary Kay Calvert, she's a reporter for Cleveland. She had a report earlier that, that could be a situation that arises. And, if we do get Baker Mayfield back in a couple of draft picks, I think we should go for it. Baker would have 1 year left on his current deal at a way cheaper price. He'd make a little bit more sense as that bridge quarterback if we do look for the quarterback of the future in the draft. And I know the draft isn't loaded with quarterbacks this year, and we'll look at that a little bit later on. But, restructure is a possibility. But the way the team is being built right now, I think trade makes the most sense. But, it's going to be another interesting development to watch play out. This offseason is going to be crazy in my opinion, and I can't wait, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I'm in the same area where I'm like so excited because there's just endless possibilities of what could happen.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Deshaun Watson who wants to play for us. I think that speaks of the front office and coaching staff hires that someone of his caliber wants to play for us. Then you have other names in Florida, like a Carson Wentz could be a bridge quarterback, which I would totally be fine with just for 1 year.
Yeah,
Because draft class is not great.
Right.
But it's I don't see why keeping Cousins makes sense and hiring a Kevin O'Connell. Because to me, if you want to extend Cousins and win now, you just go all in on Harbaugh. That makes the most sense.
Yep.
But hiring O'Connell, you're looking at this long term, and that's all you hear when Kwesi talks and O'Connell talks. It's all you hear is collaboration, long-term success. And when you hear long-term, Kirk Cousins isn't the first guy that comes to your mind. And he's 34, and I just think there is so many holes on this team that I think you're closer to like a top 5 pick than you are like a Super Bowl appearance.
Right.
You still need a center. You need a right guard. Cook's getting a little older, so, I mean, he's got about 2 or 3 years left, possibly at a high level, because he could be a cap casualty any year going forward.
Yep.
And their defense, you got Hunter, which is great. You could build around him, but then the defensive line is, up in the air. Your linebackers are getting older with Eric Hendricks. Barr won't be back. Hendricks is 30, and I think his best years might be behind him. The secondary is a complete mess with Harrison Smith, who's a Hall of Famer, but he's 33 years old, making like $16 million a year, another cap casualty. So it just seems like there's so many holes all over the place that now is the time to hit the reset. Yeah. And that starts with moving off of Cousins because we don't know where Green Bay is. Rodgers is going to be back. Is he not going to be back? The biggest mistake they could possibly make is, Rodgers is gone. So now we got to go all in. When if you do that, that's when the Bears are going to come, take advantage. Fields takes the next step, and then they could own the division because they got the young quarterback on a rookie deal going forward. And if the Vikings are willing to sacrifice maybe a year, we've already seen them bad the past 2, trying at their best. But now if they actually commit and hit the reset button for like a 1-year retool, it could benefit them for the next 5 to 7 years. And I think all of that starts with moving off of Kirk Cousins and getting some capital back and maybe a young guy in return.
Yeah, those are all great points for sure. And, I think 2022, like you said, it could just be a reset year. I don't think we're going to compete for a championship. Maybe it'll be like the Eagles. We might, flirt with the playoffs, but if we do get in, we're probably going to get our butts whooped. Because we're not a playoff team right now. Obviously, our defense is just messed up right now. Like you said, our secondary is a mess. We're moving to a 3-4 defense. Majority of these guys are not built to play in a 3-4 defense. So there's going to be a lot of rebuilding on that end of the ball as well. And then you had mentioned Dalvin Cook. That's an interesting one too. We could cut ties with Kirk Cousins, but do you think Kevin O'Connell just won a Super Bowl. And does anybody really know any of their running backs? I mean, you got Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson. Those guys aren't getting paid big money. And
Nope.
I saw a stat before the Super Bowl. I think Joe Mixon would have been, if the Bengals would have won the Super Bowl, Joe Mixon would have been like the highest paid running back to ever win a Super Bowl. No running back that has made over $6 million a year has ever won a Super Bowl. That's just a crazy stat to me. If you can move on from Dalvin Cook, even at this point, the guy can't stay healthy. And there's a lot of good running backs in this draft. I mean, there's no really special ones, but you got Alexander Madison on a cheap deal. You got Kene Nwangwu, who's fast and can be an elusive weapon. I don't know. I think that's another thing they could maybe look at. I mean, Dalvin Cook is obviously an important part of this offense, but it's just interesting to me. And we haven't had a new coach in 8 years, so his philosophies, his views could be a lot different than Mike Zimmer's. So,
Yeah, and just the Dalvin Cook. I've talked about this with a lot of people. Where I love Dalvin Cook, but with a new regime I mean, anyone is expendable on this team besides Justin Jefferson. He's the only untouchable player, and for a running back making like $12 million, when you're about like 15, 16 million over already. For a guy who's 27 years old, he'll be 27. He's blown out his knee twice because he blew it back out at Florida State as well. He's never had a full season. He's just like 1 or 2 every year it happens. One, mostly because Zimmer really overused him early on. He just seems like a guy that I wouldn't necessarily try to move, but if you kind of like float his name out there to a team like Miami with Mike McDaniel, they love to run the ball. They need a running back to really take the pressure off Tua. They offer pick 50 and maybe like a 4th round pick. I don't know if you're going to get much more than that for Dalvin Cook. And if that trade was out there, that's a thing I possibly look at and explore just because I trust Alexander Madison. Simply because when he filled in for Cook, I mean, he was great against Detroit. He was great against Seattle. He averaged nearly the same amount per carry. So I mean, and if he signs a new deal, he'll be probably about $5 or $6 million cheaper. And I'm not necessarily sure if he's $5 to $6 million worse than Dalvin Cook. And if you could get Kene Nwangwu in the screen game, and kind of like the Rams, I like to use all these different backs: Darrell Henderson, Cam Akers, Sony Michel. I mean, those are very like mediocre type names, but they get the job done. Not necessarily super cool, but it was rough. But throughout the season, they were used. So I mean, that's why if you go 3 wide receiver sets now, which is what they're doing, you don't necessarily see a full workload from running back because they're likely going to be pass heavy. Yeah. So you could get pretty much anyone in the open market and just save that money. But I don't trade Dalvin Cook simply unless you get like a 2nd round pick minimum plus a late pick. Then I'm like, okay, I'll answer the phone.
Yep. No, I totally agree. And I think you said like Miami, I think that'd be a perfect situation. Dalvin would be open to it because he's going back to Florida. I guarantee you that. And Mike McDaniel, I think it would thrive. Kind of run that 49ers offense where they use their running backs a lot, and Dalvin would be perfect in that situation. So that is something very interesting to keep your eye on. And like you said, the Rams went by running back committee and won a Super Bowl. If the Vikings could do the same situation, I think they could do it honestly. And speaking of the draft. The quarterback class is very weak this year. I mean, there's a couple guys, you got Malik Willis. People are either really high on him or like, I don't know. Then you got like the likes of Kenny Pickett, Sam Howell, Desmond Ridder, a bunch of guys that could be good, but are probably going to be like average starters or backups in my opinion. What do you kind of see in this draft? Is there anyone you'd take a flyer on in the 1st round, or would you probably maybe do like a mid-round pick if you're going to go at quarterback again, kind of like Kellen Mond last year?
It's definitely tough because you don't necessarily know what's going on with Cousins. I don't really think like Mond got a fair shake. So I think with the new coaching staff, and they brought in Jared Johnson, who's from Texas A&M. I think Mond broke his records, so there's some type of like familiarity there. But I mean, Malik Willis is the guy in this draft that everyone's just drooling over, just because of if he's developed right, he's Josh Allen.
Yep.
With his legs, like, he runs like a 4.38. He threw a foot at Senior Bowl. I think he threw like 85 yards in the air. So I mean, the talent is just there. He broke like Josh Allen's arm strength like thing there from when he was at the Senior Bowl a few years back, coming out of Wyoming. And it's kind of like similar situations. You know, people were very low on Josh Allen, kind of coming out of Wyoming. They were all in on Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, Josh Rosen. So everyone kind of just Josh Allen's got a strong arm, which is now kind of like what they're saying about Willis, and Willis has got that mobility. I mean, just watching his tape, he comes across as like Randall Cunningham from when we saw him back in Minnesota. Film is nearly identical, but I don't necessarily know if I would feel comfortable trading up for him. I think Kenny Pickett's pretty much locked in to Carolina at 6 due to their Matt Rule connection. He was originally committed to Temple, and then Rule left for Baylor, and you know they've always stayed close. But there's nothing special about Pickett. You know, everyone likes to do the Joe Burrow comparison, but it's not the same. He's got small hands. Sam Howell, to me, is a Baker Mayfield 2.0. He also doesn't take many chances. He likes to play it safe. I'm like, so we kind of already have that in Cousins. We don't really want to invest in a younger one.
Right.
But Desmond Ridder intrigues me the most because he, you know, from Luke Fickell, that's a very, very solid coach to learn from at Cincinnati. Yeah. And just the film itself looks good. But if he's available in round 2, that's more so my area. You know, I'm not trading up for him, taking him at 12 because he's 22, 23. But when you're at Cincinnati, what they did was pretty impressive. You know, you went up against Bama. You beat Notre Dame in South Bend with little to no talent necessarily around you. And Ridder just seems like the guy who could step in and start right away out of everyone. But I think Malik Willis is the most potential. And I think Minnesota should kind of just eye on the 2023 draft with the C.J. Strouds, the Bryce Young. Because if you have a rough year, those are the guys you should move up for necessarily. So if it comes down to it, maybe just roll with Cousins, keep the $45 million cap hit. Whatever happens, happens. If you have these holes, maybe you'll have a rough year and you're in that top 10 pick range where you can move up. That I would feel way more comfortable with that than taking any of the top guys right now. Because I think they should just roll with Kellen Mond if you're going to go all out and tank.
Sure.
I don't necessarily think that's the case. But no, I don't think it's worth taking a quarterback unless Malik Willis just falls into your laps at 12 or something. But no, I don't think you go after a quarterback in this year's draft class. There's too many question marks.
Right. Yeah, no, I totally understand that. And I agree with you. You know, from the scouts I've talked to and people that know these prospects really well, you hit the nail on the head. Desmond Ridder's probably the most pro ready right now. He could probably come in and run an offense. You know what I mean? I don't know if we're going to be the most explosive offense in the league, but, you know, he'd be able to function within an NFL offense, especially, you know, with Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen, and all these weapons. I think he could be successful. Now, are we going to take him in the first round? No. And like you said, second round, I would probably put a flyer out there on him, to be honest with you. But in the first round, it's Malik Willis or bust if we go in any direction. You know, I want that big-armed, athletic, mobile quarterback that Minnesota hasn't had probably since, like, Dante Culpepper. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for that injury of Dante Culpepper, you know, his career could have been a lot different too. But, you know, Malik Willis is very, very raw. You know, his highlights are a lot better than his tape, obviously. But I just think his boom is, like, so good. I think he'd be so good, honestly. He fits what today's NFL's offenses like want to look like. You know, Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. You know, Patrick Mahomes' stats at Texas Tech were nothing special, but the Chiefs saw something in him, and they're like, okay, even with Alex Smith at quarterback, you know what I mean? They're like, we're gonna take this flyer on Patrick Mahomes, and if it booms, we're gonna be Super Bowl contenders for the next however many years because he can be that good. I think Malik Willis can be that good as well. He's got all the intangibles, he's got all the tools, but he's also got that, you know, that chance to be a bust as well. So it's just, what's your comfort level as with Kevin O'Connell? So, you know, try to find that prospect that can be successful. So it's another interesting piece to this off season, but if we do move on from Kirk Cousins, what with the free agents out there right now, is there any bridge quarterbacks you kind of look for? I mean, obviously, if we make that trade to Cleveland, it'd probably be Baker Mayfield. But right now, you got like Gardner Minshew in the free agency. You got Marcus Mariota and names like that. Is there any that kind of intrigue you? Obviously, they're not going to be like all pro players or anything like that. But what do you think on that end?
I think there's a ton of bridge quarterbacks out there worth taking flyers on that. If there's ever a year to find one, this year seems to be that year, because I would feel very comfortable with guys like Jacoby Brissett. Yep. I would feel fine with Gardner Minshew. I'd feel really good with Marcus Mariota.
That's kind of my guy too, to be honest.
He could move, and they had that with Keenum in 2017, where you need a guy that can move. The offensive line, you got 3 out of the 5 solidified. Wyatt Davis could maybe be your right guard. We don't know. Bradbury's just been a bust. So if you get a guy that can move, it could open things. A name that I really like that just don't know about if he's healthy is Jameis Winston. He's only 27 years old. He looked really good in New Orleans the past 2 years when he got in, simply just because of Sean Payton. Whenever you learn from Sean Payton, you're in a great spot. But Carson Wentz is also intriguing. You could also go and trade for Drew Lock. They had interest in him last year. We don't, if you move on from Cousins to Denver, you get him in return to compete with Kellen Mond. So I think this is the year to find bridge quarterbacks. But Mariota seems like the top tier one that everyone's going after. And, he's learned and sat behind Carr for about 2 or 3 years now. And he's very smart. He's got the intangibles. The talent's not necessarily been there, but he's got such a high IQ. He's going to make players around him better, and he's going to call his own plays. He'll run the offense smoothly. Where if you could just run with Dalvin Cook, you hit Jefferson here and there, Thielen, they could be at least a top 10 offense. Yeah. Even with Mariota, without Cousins, and Mariota's going to probably cost $8 to $10 million total, which is about $25 million less than Cousins. Right. You could probably still win about 7 or 8 games, which is why if you could come up with that and figure that out, and you truly believe if you win 7 to 8 games with Mariota for $25 million less, then I think you have your answer on if Kirk Cousins should be here long term. That if you're going over guys who you think could get the job done, because wins really matter. I know people say quarterback wins aren't the stat, but they are.
Yeah.
And I just think Cousins was nice in 2017 to 2018 of we got to win now. 2018, 2019 were their year. They were the Rams back then.
Yep.
But they missed the playoffs the first year. They made it the second year. They got exposed by the 49ers. So that was the peak for me in the Zimmer era, the Cousins era, everything. So I just think Mariota's a good spot. I think Mariota, Winston are the top tier guys. Even Carson Wentz. You could make the playoffs with Carson Wentz.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He's from North Dakota. He grew up as a Vikings fan. It makes sense. Low risk, high reward. You could probably get him for a 6th and then cut him, or you just wait for him to be cut because the Colts are moving on from him. So he's going to be available. But, if they do move on from Cousins, that whole name group, I think you could win a good portion of games with and have as a bridge quarterback.
Yeah, I think I just want to get Carson Wentz on the Vikings just to see how Vikings Twitter would respond. I think that'd be just worth it alone, to be honest with you. And I'm a fan of Carson Wentz, honestly. Not at what he's getting paid, obviously, but I'm a fan. He's got that big arm. He's got that playmaking ability. When he was at the Eagles his first year or two, man, he was one of the most exciting quarterbacks in the league. He was honestly trending towards what Josh Allen is now, in my opinion. In that MVP type season before he got hurt, and then they won the Super Bowl and kicked our butts 38-7 in the NFC Championship. But we're not going to talk about that today. But yeah, I'm with you. I think Marcus Mariota makes a lot of sense. He's going to be a cheap option. He can run an NFL offense. He deserves that second chance, in my opinion, to be a starting quarterback in this league. I think he could put up good numbers with all the weapons that the Vikings have. And then I think Jameis Winston also is very intriguing as well. Obviously, he's a little bit more turnover prone than I would like, but Matt Stafford threw 17 interceptions this year with the Rams. That led the NFL, and they still won the Super Bowl. I'm not comparing Winston and Stafford, but it's the same concept where turning over the ball and making some of those big risks downfield isn't always so bad. You know what I mean? I don't know why teams don't do that more, like on a 3rd and like 14. Chuck the ball down the field. Try to get a big play. Try to draw a defensive pass interference. If they pick it off, that's 40 yards down the field anyway. You're going to punt it the next play anyway. So I don't know. I think they kind of did that a little bit more in Los Angeles. But, yeah, I think like you said, and this is the year to find a bridge quarterback. And I think that's what makes it even more intriguing with, move on from Kirk Cousins. We can find another guy for 30% of the contract that Cousins getting paid right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, like you said, I think it's a perfect year to kind of look at that market, especially with the weak QB class. So, yeah. And then obviously 2023, if we did that, we'd probably be looking for a quarterback in the 2023 draft. And like you said, CJ Stroud would be like a dream. But
his film, I mean, he's just far beyond what Justin Fields was at Ohio State.
Yeah.
And as a redshirt freshman, he looked phenomenal. But I mean, another quarterback, I mean, we didn't get talked about much about was Deshaun Watson. He's only 26, going to be 27. He seems like a guy that it's not a bad guy to target necessarily if the legal issues get resolved. You can't trade for him now unless those picks are just heavy protected.
Yep.
He's just a name. I wrote an article last night about if they should pursue him, if they shouldn't pursue him. I wrote one from every angle. There's definitely a lot of question marks. But if they could get Watson, this team could compete now and still
for sure.
Still not even enter their prime yet. So, I mean, I know Vikings Twitter, exploded yesterday when that happened. Oh, my God, he wants to play for us?
Right.
He does make the same amount as Cousins. So, I mean, if people like Cousins and don't mind his salary, Watson is well beyond where Cousins is at.
For sure.
I mean, he's
I
just
agree, yeah. What's that?
No, if they could just land him. I mean, apparently he wants to play with Justin Jefferson. That's the main thing. And
I mean, who wouldn't, right?
I don't know what it's going to cost.
Right.
I'd maybe start negotiations with Cousins, Hendricks, 2 firsts, see what happens. Maybe they want Cook. There's a lot of possibilities. That's why this offseason is so great, because the quarterback position, when you're hearing guys like Watson and all these possibilities, where the fact that Watson wants to play for Minnesota and Ajar, his agent, is leaking it, to me that comes across as Minnesota behind the scenes is doing background checks and homework on other quarterbacks.
Oh, for sure.
To move on from Cousins, because Watson's not going to want to come play in Minnesota if they're committed to Kirk Cousins long term.
Oh, for sure.
So that's kind of like journalism 101, where Kirk Cousins, all indications are showing that Cousins is staying in Minnesota. That's not always the case.
It's not. It's a smoke screen most of the time.
Yes, it's the off-season, so take everything with a grain of salt.
Yeah, exactly. And, take away Deshaun Watson's, legal situation going on right now. He's one of my favorite players. As a football player, not as a person. Come on, okay? I don't want to get – I know how people take certain statements, especially on Twitter and social media and stuff like that. As a football player, he's one of my most favorite players in the entire National Football League. He can make every single throw. He's athletic, and like you said, he's only, 26 years old yet? I mean, if he gets his legal situation right now figured out, the Vikings need to figure out a way to get him to Minnesota. Because, even if they're not going to win a Super Bowl this year or next, the guy's only 26 years old. He's just entering his prime. You know what I mean? They need to try to figure that out, and who knows what it's going to take. If he gets exonerated from all the cases and stuff like that, he probably won't even get suspended. I don't think that's likely. I mean, there's 22 files against him, so I'm guessing there's going to be 1 or 2 charges maybe, and then he might get suspended for 8 games or something like that. But it's going to be interesting to see what his trade value is, because obviously he's not going to play one more game for the Houston Texans. So, I don't know. Like you said, Deshaun Watson, wouldn't have his eye on the Vikings if they didn't know something was going on behind the scenes with Kirk Cousins, with Minnesota. And especially when Watson has a no trade clause. You know what I mean? He can pretty much pick who and choose who he wants to go play for.
Which
I
could
can't
also
believe
lower
all
his
that's happening.
trade value in a way, because if Houston's hands are kind of tied, because Miami's committed to Tua.
Yeah.
And the Buccaneers, they clearly have interest in him. They've done their homework, but his pick, 28, 29, is that pick and others going to really do much for Houston? When Minnesota, on the other hand,
Right.
they got pick 12. That's that's an intriguing one where Houston could have 2 top 12 picks.
Yeah.
So that could really help their rebuild. But to me, I know a lot of people love Cousins. They love his stats. Cousins 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 4,200 yards. Well, Deshaun Watson, he's got good stats too. His last season, he won 4 games in Houston with no DeAndre Hopkins. They had David Johnson, Bill O'Brien, I think. It was a disaster, and he completed 70.2% of his passes, 4,800 plus yards, 33 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, had a rating of 112. He also ran for 400 yards, and he was sacked the second most in the league at 49 times. And this guy still put it all out there. So the fact that he could do that with a team of Houston, imagine what he could do with Jefferson, Thielen,
For sure.
Irv Smith, Dalvin Cook, and he could survive with that offensive line. So it just seems like a no-brainer. If all legal issues are resolved, I would trade 3 first-round picks and 2 top-tier players just to get him. Because he's top 3 to 5 at that position when healthy.
Yep.
And the Vikings, at this point, if you make that trade, that's a statement that we're not settling for being mediocre anymore.
Yeah.
Like, we want to compete for championships, like Mark Wilt has said. He said that as soon as the season ended, when they moved on from Spielman, Zimmer, we want to compete for championships year in, year out. And if you really do want to do that, then that's the move you make. Or you can just say, I hope, I'm praying, we hope we land on a guy in the draft. That's pretty much how it goes. Because no one's guaranteed.
Right.
Watson, though, he is guaranteed. And he's a winner. Yeah. He's won wherever he goes. So, to me, it's a no-brainer. You got to make the trade. Of course, as long as the legal issues get resolved.
Yep. No, I'm totally in the same boat as you. I would do everything I can if they get that figured out to get Deshaun Watson over here. I mean, he brought Houston to back-to-back playoff trips, correct? Back-to-back years.
Yep. 3 touchdown lead on Mahomes, too. In Kansas City, and the defense ended up blowing it. Yeah,
and that was with Bill O'Brien. Terrible head coach. Terrible organization. The Houston's just a mess. Just a mess of an organization. And he brought them to the playoffs back-to-back years. Just crazy stuff, man. Again, Tom, man, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, no problem.
It was really fun to talk about Kevin O'Connell and the quarterback situation. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more to talk about after Kevin has his press conference this afternoon. And obviously, the quarterback situation is fluid. It's going to be a conversation until they figure out what they're going to do with Kirk Cousins. So very interesting offseason. Tom's going to join me again here. If you're available tomorrow, you available tomorrow?
I am available tomorrow.
Okay. I think we're going to wait. We got some fan questions on Twitter that we wanted to go over, so maybe we can pick and choose some questions off Twitter and talk about those tomorrow if that works for you.
Yep. Sounds great, man.
All right. Awesome, man. Again, Tom, thank you for joining me today. Again, you can follow him on Twitter at Thomas Gorski 33. Give him some love over there. He did a great job today, man. Again, thank you. All right, guys. We'll see you in the next one.